Gamers, today I'm going to make basically a video explaining the most aggressive and the most defensive civs. And we also have a neutral category that's going to be kind of like a little bit of both, and I'm going to try to explain why the civs are aggressive, why the civs are defensive, and so on and so forth. But before we get started, I do want to say that every civ can be played defensive and can be played aggressive. I just want to make this based on like what you're supposed to play the civ as, right? So for example, French is an aggressive civ. Let's put it straight away into the aggressive. But you can play French with multiple TCs and going late game. There's nothing wrong with that. But the strengths of the French lie in attacking early and attacking in the feudal age. So French is one of the aggressive civs. Now there are a lot of builds with French that include, 2TC or even 3TC. Some builds you can do trade with French and play more defensive. But like I said, the strength of the civ in general is you get fast eco upgrades, you got good villager production, you attack your opponent, and pretty much general rule of thumb is if you have knights in feudal age, you are supposed to be playing that civ as an aggressive civ, because having knights in feudal age allows you to have something that other civs don't. So you want to use that until you reach castle age, when the opponent will have knights and you will have knights as well. So another benefit of the knight civs in general in French is even if the opponent ages up to castle, you can still use your feudal knights to fight his army. So it's usually very hard to rush castle age ups against knight civs because of that. Even though you have castle knights, if they have more feudal knights, they will win the fight. So in general, French is considered an aggressive civ. Even after going to TC, you're supposed to be attacking and forcing your opponents to defend, going for the map control, and so on and so forth. Next one is going to be China. Again, China can be played like 1TC, all in or aggression with the Zugunu spam. You can go castle rush, but in general, China is played 2TC. The reason it's played with 2TC is because you have Barbican, which is a defensive landmark, so it helps you to secure your resources a lot easier, and then allows you to boom with second TC a lot easier compared to some of the other civs that lack that kind of defensive structures or positioning or whatever else. And another thing is, even if you are attacking into China, their TC doesn't shoot arrows, it shoots the hand cannon attack, whatever it's called, and it does pretty well against like even units with armor. So in general, China is considered a boom civ. So there it is. Another boom civ that it's pretty obvious is gonna be the Abbasid. Now Abbasid, there are builds that are like 1TC aggression with Abbasid, but it's not very good, and you can only like catch opponent off guard, if they maybe don't scout or they don't know what they're doing. But in general, if you wanna be aggressive on 1TC, I would probably suggest to go for some other civ and not Abbasid. Abbasid is usually a civ where even if you go for military wing, you want to stay on 2TC at least. If you go eco, you want to stay at 3TC or have 3TC or more. And then also you can go trade wing, which is, also you got to play passive, right? You got to defend. And then there's a culture wing that you can technically rush castle, but even if you're rushing castle or something, you're still playing defensive until that point. Next one that we're going to be talking about is going to be the friend of the French. It is Rus. Rus can be played just like French. You can play 2TC. You can even do some 2TC rushes into castle. So a lot of people might consider Rus to be like a neutral civ, because you can do 2TC into castle rush and get the relics. But if that's something you're interested in, again, you might as well play HRE, right? Because HRE does that better. So I think the strength of Rus in this case is you get Kremlin, which boosts your wood production. You get Gremlins, which give you potential for stronger push in feudal age. You force the opponent to slow down with their economy by having to deny deer and wolves on star, by having to make another scout. And you also have access to knights. So usually the playstyle with Rus is 2 town centers into, knight archer, and just kind of do a massive push. And whenever you feel like you can push in with rams, you summon all the militia, aka the gremlins, and then you just kind of go for it. So while you can go for 2TC into castle rush, you're not unlocking anything there, right? You're not getting access to knights. You're not unlocking some super good tech that's going to help you in the long run. it makes more sense with Rus to stay in feudal and fight for as long as possible and just get the map control. And usually the civs that are aggressive, by the way, are civs that have very good map control and don't need to transition to farms super early. The next civilization that I'll be talking about is going to be maybe I'll reshuffle these. I don't know how many civs I'm gonna have in neutral, but we'll see. Now, Delhi is definitely an aggressive civ, without a doubt. Delhi 2TC is something that I've tried many times, people have tried, but the whole point of Delhi is to either do like some kind of sacred site capture into a castle rush, and then you mass knights, or to just mass units with Tower Victory in feudal, take the sacred sites, and just continue pushing against your opponent. So, whichever way you spin it, Delhi is very, very, very aggressive civ, and probably one of the most aggressive civs that exist in the game. And the fact that you can capture the sacred sites, you kind of invite your opponent to come to the middle of the map to fight you, so yeah. Next one is going to be Ayyubid. I'm going to put Ayyubid in neutral. I think Ayyubid, right now the new civs, specifically like Ayyubid, Byzantines, and Japanese, are still getting figured out. But I would say Ayyubid is pretty neutral right now. If you go the Gamba wing, there's like, depending which traders you get in the Gamba wing, you can like be aggressive with the units instantly, or you can get more defensive stuff. There are 2 TC builds. There's a build where you go Gamba wing into archer range, and then you make the desert raiders and you immediately attack. There's the fast castle rushers build. Like, Ayyubid can do so many things that I don't think it's aggressive or defensive. I think it can literally do anything. And it can also go for trade because of the Gamba wing. So it can do anything, and it is our first neutral civilization. Next civ that I'll be talking about is going to be Jushi's Legacy, and I don't think this is any big surprise. Now, Jushi Legacy can be more aggressive than China and Abbasid, and initially the meta was to kind of like get a second TC and then like mass units and stuff like that, but because people figured out you can transition to farms really quickly, people have now started to kind of like skip the aggression, just make units defensively, and then basically when your opponent runs out of food, you're gonna have an easier farm transition because of the Jushi Song Dynasty, and you can make a shit ton of farms and just kill your opponent later on. But it is usually a 2 TC build. Even if you're aggressive afterwards, you always go 2 TC in the current day and age. You can still do 1 TC, right? Just like China, but the meta is kind of settling in and people are, 2 TC is the way. The next civ we'll be talking about is Jeanne, which is definitely an aggressive civ. Simple reason is you have a hero needs experience to level. The whole civ is like very based into the hero. So if you don't level your hero and you just play passively and use Jeanne d'Arc defensively or as a villager, you might as well just play another civ. So you are supposed to be out on the map. You are supposed to force your opponent to fight you. You're not supposed to sit back. You gotta go for it. So, yeah. Next civilization we'll be talking about is Mongol. Another very, very aggressive civ. Now, Mongol is technically aggressive while booming at the same time, because you usually go with trade behind. So even if you are aggressive with Mongol, which you should be, you know, from tower rushes to later on Keshik archer combo, you want to be active on the map, you want to harass your opponent, but behind it you go for a trade. So I wouldn't put this in the neutral tier because you're not either trading or attacking, you're doing both at the same time with a very heavy emphasis on attacking and putting pressure on your opponent. You're basically defending by being constantly aggressive. So next one we're going to be talking about is Holy Roman Empire. Now, Holy Roman Empire is a defensive civ. I was trying to think where to put it, because technically you can do Burgher, but Burgher is not super commonly played at higher levels. And even if you go for some kind of Burgher rush, I feel like it's more a cheese than a play style. Like, you don't go Burgher and then like play a normal game. You usually just all in with it, right? And I think in general, HRE is a defensive civ. Like, you're either trying to get a second town center into castle, or you're trying to get a fast castle to get the relics and just kind of protect the prelates, or you're trying to get to the castle so you can skip and go imperial almost straight away. So It relies on basically booming your economy a lot with relics or Palace of Slavia, and then just massing crazy amount of units, which is what usually macro civs do, right? Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be, I'm going to put Order of the Dragon in neutral. Now, again, all the new civs is a little bit of a question mark, except maybe Jeanne d'Arc, whether they should be put, and Jushi's Legacy. But Order of the Dragon, I tried it with 2 TC, and I've tried it with 1 TC. I've tried, like, I don't think you castle rush with Order of the Dragon. It's not like HRE, where castle rushes is good. I think with Order, you either go for 2 town centers, or you just make units in feudal, and you try to trade and attack your opponent. That's something that's different than HRE. And HRE is pretty weak in feudal, whereas Order of the Dragon can fight because they're archers that are very, very strong. So we're going to put them, they can do a little bit of both. They can do macroing, but they can play more passive, but they can also be more aggressive with like horsemen and harassing and so forth. The next thing we'll be talking about is, I actually discussed this with my chat earlier, Malians. I'm going to put them into an aggressive civ. Now, Malians is a bit different than the other civs because Malian is not aggressive immediately. The whole point of Malian is to actually get the cow boom, rush castle, and then be omega aggressive, right? You just don't stop attacking. So even though you don't fight in feudal necessarily, even though you can fight in feudal with Malians, with Donzo javelin throwers, it's very, very strong. And you can slowly add cows, so you can play like that. You don't usually ever see Malian 2 town center, but you do see Malian cow boom with like preferably with 0 units into castle, and then it's just like 9, 10, 11 production buildings and you just go all out. And the reason why you become so aggressive with Malian at castle, because you need the cow boom to power up your army, but you're not looking to extend that economic lead past the cows. You're not looking to add a second TC at any point. You kind of hit your power spike and you just go all out. And because Malian Imperial is not that great, you try to end the games in the Castle Age. The next thing we'll be talking about is going to be Byzantines. Now, Byzantines right now are, there's a lot of stuff being figured out with Byzantines, but I would say that Byzantine Hypodrome 1 TC build is viable, but also 2 TC with the Winery Landmark is viable with the like the mercenary build. But I think we're not really settled if it's gonna go one way or another, and this is probably the civ that I'm least like confident where it's gonna go. If it's gonna become like 1 TC civ or 2 TC, kind of more defensive. But I'm kind of leaning like Byzantines will be a more defensive civ in the long run. But right now, I would say it's a little bit of both. Surprisingly, the next civ that used to be very aggressive, but not anymore, or it is aggressive, but it can be played in other ways, is Ottoman. So Ottoman used to be like, for the past year, used to be like, you make military school, you make spearmen, you attack, and then you make archer range, sipahi, and you just go on 1 TC. But we've actually seen a lot more military schools into castle rushes recently. We've seen a lot more 2 TC builds with Ottomans into castle rushes because you get access to knights, you get access to janissaries. Also, the reason why you were all inning so much before with Ottoman is because you didn't have good late game, but now the Great Bombards have been buffed like a few patches ago, and Ottoman late game is actually pretty good in my opinion. So they can kind of be played every way you want. You can play super all in, you can play castle rush, you can play 2 TC, so I would say they're a little bit of everything, right? But most of the time people play them aggressively, but I think equally good to just chill and rush castle and play more macro version. The next thing we'll be talking about is English. Now, in my opinion, English is leaning towards more aggressive, but it can be played defensively. Like you can play it for the long run. So I'm not really sure where to put it, because I think the best way to play English is aggressively, but you can go for 2 town centers against certain civs and try to like wait it out. I'm kind of looking at the other civs. Now I'm gonna have to put it in aggressive. Like, you can play English 2 TC, but no matter which civ you're playing against, I feel like if you go for 2 town centers, you're just putting yourself behind, because if it's a knight civ and they go 2 TCs, they will outboom you. If it's a boom civ like China, if you go 2 town center, they go 2 town center, China will scale well way better. So I do think that English is supposed to be played 1 TC, and the most common build with English is 1 TC with eco upgrades into military upgrades into spearman longbow, and then when you have like 16 farms, you go for mass meta-arm plus longbow. And the last one is going to be Japanese. Now, Japanese right now is in a bit of a weird spot. So similar to Byzantines, so I'm going to put Japanese in the neutral tier where they can be played aggressively with shinobis, especially on the water maps, hybrid maps, water maps. Japanese is played very, very aggressively, but on land they're played a bit more defensive. But we've also seen, you know, the build that I did the guide for with the 1 TC mass Ona Bugattis and the Bannerman. We've seen, you know, that build be very successful in feudal. So I feel like Japanese, like Byzantines, is still kind of being discovered. I'm sure the Civs are going to have a lot of changes. So who knows what the future brings. But for now, I think Japanese can be played super aggro, but it can also be played a little bit more defensive. So there it is. I would say most of the Civs in AoE 4 are aggressive, as you can see here. The defensive Civs are usually very defensive, and the aggressive Civs, I feel like, can be very aggressive, but they can also take a chill pill. I would say that Delhi, Jeanne d'Arc, Mongol, and Malian and English are probably go all out. I would say that French and Rus maybe should be in the neutral tier, where it's like, yeah, they're aggressive, they can play aggressive, but they can also play a more passive game into aggression. But I think this is a pretty good one. So if you ever wondered which Civ you want to play or which Civ is for you, I hope that this helps you make that decision and helps you choose maybe your next or your second Civ or your third Civ, and so on and so forth. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Check me out on Twitch or ProLab right now. Twitch gamers. Let's keep going.